Hello, and welcome back to the Awakening Philosophy podcast. My name is Jed. Thank you for joining me. We are reading the Phaedo. Last time we came up with a whole bunch of really interesting questions, and we saw a whole bunch about the text that we're reading. Specifically, what is necessarily involved for this to be what we are expecting to see. We are hoping to see this as the greatest hero story. What's going to be involved? How do we match Socrates and become the greatest heroes ourselves? For ourselves, primarily for ourselves. Greedy for the logos. Secondarily, it will have a benefit on others. How do we do that? How do we master the superpower of Socrates? What he is calling the art of the logos, so that we are able to judge whether or not Socrates himself was successful. In his last day, he said he wants to pass on something. The opposite of a bee passing on a sting. When the bee dies, he wants to do the opposite. So what is that? He seems to be calling it the art of the logos. So we want to know what the art of the logos is and figure out how we can get it for ourselves. We're also seeing the stakes of this. It's literally what we need to solve problems and reach our highest goals. Hitting those two big words we've been carrying all the way with us, fate and destiny. Fate, what you're negatively bound to, the inevitable repeating cycles of problems and failures and negative states of mind. We want to free ourselves from that the same way Socrates is freeing himself from the chains around his feet before he begins this discussion. And he said, freeing himself from the chains of the body in the art of philosophy, which is the art and practice of death and dying, but also leaving the cycle of reincarnation because he is being put to death by the state at the end of this text. So we want to free ourselves from fate and reach our highest, most meaningful goal and our purpose, because one of the virtues is justice, which is doing your intended functioning. So our highest, most meaningful goal is not only the best thing we can do, it's our intended function. It's what we're here for. Therefore, we call it destiny. And if all living things share the same destiny, we can call it the destiny, or the destiny of man, it's sometimes called, because all people. Socrates points out you can understand all physical things the same way. They all reach out for some aspect of being. Sticks want to be equal to each other. Beautiful things want to be beautiful. People who love things seek to unify with thumbs up. Things that love seek to unify with beauty. Everything we desire because it's good and we want it for ourselves. This is all a yearning towards being, because these, as we learn in philosophy, as we learn for ourselves, are aspects or the ideas of being, of the metaphysical dimension that exists. Also, secondarily, we have a purpose to remind others of that purpose, of their purpose too. Because, as Socrates points out, adjusting myself in my seat, Socrates points out, we start by looking through our physical senses as human beings. We have to become a lover of learning. And then, by noticing physical things, we can be reminded of our task to learn about reality. Our reality where we were before we were born. Therefore, all learning is a remembering what we once knew, or do know, and once we were experiencing directly. So reaching our destiny is part of the art of the logos and freeing ourselves from our problems, which is wonderful. Somebody asked me recently, what made you interested in philosophy? And I thought, I guess it was discovering that there is a rational way of understanding reality. It's not all unknowable or opinion. It kind of made sense. Well, yeah, of course there are patterns in our world. So hearing somebody say, oh, you can understand reality, you can understand your purpose, you can understand the meaning of life, you can understand the spiritual quest. Yeah, it's all understandable. It's like, oh yeah, of course that is. That was a big breath of fresh air for me. Because so many people around me were attracted not to learning, but to the physical senses. Lover of the body, not a lover of learning, as Socrates calls it. So they were too busy doing things and experiencing things and doing activities and seeking pleasures to care about understanding why we're here, what we're here for, where are we going. Because isn't it strange that we're going to die? Where do we go? What's the point of this? So having somebody come along and say, yeah, it's understandable. That was a big wake-up call. Like, oh yeah, thank goodness. And in the text, Socrates literally said, there is a certain logos that is firm, sound, and understandable. That's what got me into it. And of course, that's the thing that is rejected by those lovers of the body, the ones who don't actually love learning, but love pretending to be wise, cosplaying the knowers. There are many of them. Some of them teach philosophy. Some of them have channels on YouTube. Some of them start their own life coaching courses. Some of them are preachers within established religions. Some of them start their own religions. There is a big appeal. Some of them have kids so they can play this role. What role? Professional opinion havers. But the blame is not on humans. This is important. And the blame is not on the logos. It's not that all we have is opinions. That's not the cause. The blame or the cause is the absence or presence of the art of the logos. So, people who love to be professional opinion havers like to feel like they know things, and maybe even get a job where they get to be a petty tyrant, we call them in capitalism. They get to act like they're smart and wise when they're not. The reason is because we seek knowing, we seek wisdom, we seek nous and understanding dianoia. So it's actually, underneath it is actually something good. The problem is we lack the art of the logos to do it well, so all we can do is make it pretend. In the absence of the art of the logos, all you can do is to get into positions of authority and convince people. And that's what Socrates is saying. Hey, these people who are lovers of quarreling, but not actually lovers of wisdom, what they seek is others who are present to believe what they're selling. That's every news network and business and pretty much, not every, but almost all mainstream media, and because that's what gets you money. You can manipulate people to believe what you're selling. And that's the majority of religions too. Big bucks in religion, a lot of power in religion, and fame. Socrates has said, I'm not interested in others believing me. That's secondary. I want the logos for myself, for self. This is key all the way through philosophy. The most important thing is self. I want self to believe what I'm saying is true. Secondarily, it will benefit others. By being true, it will naturally be beautiful and persuasive. Isn't that cool? We're here for us, and if we do our job, we will naturally illuminate others. Another interesting thing that can get people into philosophy is not just discovering there is a certain logos that is true, firm, and understandable. So we're not just at the whim of opinions or groups who bind together with a shared ignorance, which is our current level of society. That's where we are within the evolution of humanity as a species. We're at the level of groupthink. Certain religious groups and political groups dominate, And if a leader can appeal to a certain pathologos or family prejudice that is prevalent within the society, they get voted in. Which makes things, this is another reason I love philosophy, it makes things so simple. If you understand, yeah, that's how we evolve. Inside cave good, outside cave bad, scary. Therefore, crush your own self goals, your own self curiosity in mind, and your own self thinking. To survive as a species who have not yet learnt the logos, evolved to the accessing the logos. Once we can access logos, we have to put that aside and develop the art of the logos. Because those very things that we are squashing to evolve and not get eaten by saber-toothed tigers because we don't have language yet, those very things that we squash, the self-mind or being or reality, and logos, understanding, self-logos. These are the excellences of a self. These are the excellences of man. They're also the three highest levels of enlightenment, the three highest hypotheses of Parmenides. Hypotheses of Parmenides, of course, is the dialectic explained. Therefore, this understandable nature of reality, when applied to personal development or evolution or levels of thinking and experience, that's the hypotheses of Parmenides. That's why they call it the greatest book never read. It's a map. It's a map of spiritual, personal, and cultural development. And we can identify where we are in our level simply by understanding the dialectic. And we could read it in the Parmenides, or we could see it ourselves. See we're at a level of group think that we have to evolve to. What's the one after group think? Logos. A level of development where you can access the logos. Why? Because the art of the logos makes all the difference. That's Socrates' superpower. That's what makes him the greatest hero. That's his quirk. If you like My Hero Academia. The art of the logos. That's what we have to master to be like Socrates. And do our job here. It makes problems understandable and solvable, and it makes our highest goals understandable and reachable. The two rungs of the ladder, understandable and experienceable. Therefore, it's a rational spiritual tradition. It's the rational spiritual tradition. In fact, if you have a spiritual tradition that lacks experience or lacks understanding, it's incomplete. Therefore, what Socrates said about philosophy being the one true mystical tradition, we can understand why. We don't have to just believe him and form a group and bind together with a group of people who are saying, philosophy is the best number one thing. Screw Taoism, screw Buddhism, we are the best. We don't have to do that. Because we're not at the level of groupthink. What makes our opinions or beliefs true isn't the power of a group or power over others. The way Philonikoses are, lovers of debate, lovers of arguing. Philodoxia, lovers of opinion. So we're a different class, we're evolving up. We could still have a group and we have a community, but it's open to all who want to understand and know. Open to all who want to free themselves from their problems and reach their highest goals. And everyone seeks it. It's a way of unifying everyone on the planet because it's literally the destiny of man. Socrates is laying this all out for us. Hey, this is what I'm giving you. Isn't that wonderful? Spit out the black pill. Don't be a doomer. We're not doomed. And the last 5 years, we have a translation where we can actually understand what he's giving us. That which can save and perfect our individual problems, greedy for you, but also humanity itself. And everything else that we see in the everyday world, political drama, in our individual dramas, in our work dramas, in our school dramas, is just the playing out of the implications of all of the various things that follow if we don't have the art of the logos. Which is important as we're learning the dialectic has side A and side B all the way through this podcast. What is philosophy and what isn't philosophy? You don't understand it properly unless you have both. You have to recognize love of learning, love of wisdom, love of phronesis, as well as love of opinion, love of the body, love of debate. You need to recognize both. So likewise, if we are playing out in time the implications of our learning, we're also playing out in time the implications of our lack of learning. And what our learning is, that is the true practice of philosophy, that is our true purpose here, that is our true destiny, that is what we need for our reincarnations, and what we need to enter that place where Socrates is telling, hey, meet me here. Evolve our own soul to the next dimension of evolution. What we need, Socrates is calling the art of the logos. We have a name for it, which is fantastic. It unifies all the parts. Remember all the parts we've learned? We've learned about dianoia, about nous, about contemplation, about the logos and the dialectic, about the self-logos categories of beauty and goodness and justice. Thumbs up. The category of a greater, less, and equal. And the other category that's prominent in the Parmenides, whole, part, same, difference, like, unlike, that class that's more intellectual. All of those selfers have an existence within being, and we've learned about that. We've learned that they have a hyparxis called self-ousia, that we have an ousia as our sense that we have to awaken, and it's the turning ourselves around. We've learned about having to repeat this over and over. Every time we see something new, we can go back, and there's a lot of recaps in our podcast, which is fantastic. Because as we go back, we'll see it in a new way over and over, allowing us to level up or evolve what we once saw. All of these things and more we've been seeing, but now we've been given a fantastic gift. We've been given the name, art of the logos, a way of unifying all those. Isn't that wonderful? And this is another reason that philosophy appealed to me. It makes things so gosh darn simple. Yes, there is a process. You start with a definition, step one. You look for demonstrations in yourself, in the world, in the text. How does this thing you're defining demonstrate itself? Make it real for you. Bring in Aphrodite. Make it not a dry, dead definition of just Apollo, just philosophy. Make it real and beautiful and meaningful and significant. This is your destiny. This solves your problems. You can experience enlightenment. It's not just for the Taoists. It's not just for the Buddhists. It's not just for the Shaolin monks. You can do it, and you can do it better because it's a complete tradition. Understanding and experience. So define and demonstrate and division. Yes, you have to make it messy for a while. You have to get confused. That's the division. See all the different terms, all of those terms that I just mentioned, self-er terms, all of the key terms in the text, all of the puzzles we unpack and discover, our question sack, our hypothesis sack, all of the dialectics we made. On the board we have dozens of dialectics that are some complete, some half finished, some just started. It's a mess. It's a bit messy. But that's part of it. Get confused, get puzzled, get uncomfortable in the mess, while trusting the logos for good reason. That's the division stage. What happens after the division stage? Synthesis and analysis. Synthesis, unify all that together with a keyword or a term that's the most important or most primal or most causal or earliest. That can make it simple again. And then once it's synthesized, it's analyzed. You take it back, you turn yourself around, ousia, you go back to what was there the whole time, and you see it in a new way. With that synthesis, you see it more simply. Philosophy allows you to see what was always there more simply and better. You are getting better. Of course, there are lots of cultures that don't want you to judge, don't want you to think there's a better or worse, don't want you to distinguish between vice and virtue, because they hate the logos. They revile it. And Socrates says that's the worst condition of man, because they were let down by the logos. So often, they didn't blame their lack of the art of the logos, they blamed the logos itself. If I've been wrong, if teachers have lied to me, if Buddhism and Taoism, Hinduism and all these traditions don't agree, if all these philosophers don't agree, if there are hundreds of different religions all in contrast to each other, there must not be a truth. Otherwise, we wouldn't allow so much difference and contradiction and war and violence and strife. There must not be a logos. There must not be a true, sound way of understanding the most important things. Socrates says this is what we have to be on guard for. This is the worst condition. If you hate the logos, you will deprive your soul from knowing truth and reality, being the thing you're here to get to reawaken with understanding, and maybe even go beyond. That's a puzzle. So we can understand why people hate the logos, why we don't learn about this, why it's rare to hear this kind of conversation, why it's rare to hear, oh yeah, there is just one philosophy. How dare you? What about my personal truth? What about my religion? It saved me when I was sad. So, well, maybe the aspects, there were other things. Maybe you were saved in spite of your religion. Maybe there were some things, maybe the attention you liked. Maybe community, met a need for community with you. Doesn't make it true. Or maybe you learnt in spite of the false aspects. Doesn't make it true. But there is a truth. And hey, if you like the community, have a community around truth. Why not? Why not level it up? Why not improve your tradition? Why not improve your habits? Can't do that, because that would require you to judge whether or not this new thing is actually an improvement. Which is why most spiritual traditions reject anything different than what the first person said. Because they don't know themselves. They're believing that first person and his doctrines. But that's where the art of the logos comes in. All of these problems cleansed with the art of the logos. Isn't that wonderful? Because you can think for yourself with the art of the logos. As we saw in our friend Simmias, I will not be tricked by myself or anybody else into thinking that our soul is not immortal. Because I started by just trusting you, Socrates, trusting the logos. But then I heard an argument which kind of sounds familiar, or kind of seems probable, like modern science. And then I was thrown into chaos. I was thrown into doubt. If you keep having that experience, that's a blow. Those many blows end up with you hating the logos, the worst condition. But you have to realize, it's not that there isn't understanding, there isn't a logos, there isn't a firm, true, universal paradigm that runs through everything. Music, geometry, biology, spiritual evolution, states of mind, human culture. everything. It's not that that doesn't exist. It's that you lack the art of the logos to see it, to judge whether that person is trustworthy, to judge whether that argument is legitimate or not. The art of the logos. So beautiful. Isn't it beautiful? And of course, one of the things that shows an argument to be legitimate, not only a logical necessity, not only reasoned arguments following the dialectic structure, but a certain beauty comes to light. Aphrodite, Apollo and Aphrodite, the beauty of it. All of those things inside B. What follows if we don't have philosophy? Or we had a dialectic, what happens if we're not taught dialectic at school? All of these negative things, war, strife, civil discord, genocide, all of the key terms from the text, and all of the ones we can see ourselves in our own experience. All of them can be unified so simply in the art of the logos. So all of our dialectics, what if philosophy doesn't exist? And then we have all those negatives. Or what if the dialectic isn't taught? All those negatives. What if we don't understand, we don't have dianoia? What if we don't have nous? What if we don't awaken our self-ousia? What if we don't transition from a love of learning to a love of philosophy? All of those dialectics have a whole bunch of negatives in the demonstration and division stages. We've got dozens of them on the board. But we can take this word, the art of the logos, and unify all of it, synthesis, and then take it back to the start to understand it in a more clear, simple, pure, evolved way. What if philosophy doesn't exist? The art of the logos ain't there. So what do we want? The art of the logos. What's the thing that's the opposite to a bee sting? The best thing that we want to leave, Socrates wants to leave behind, that we said would be necessary for the greatest hero. The greatest hero's got to pass it on. The art of the logos. So back to the question I got in the week. What drew you to philosophy? Well, I said, to hear that there is a rational way of understanding everything. Within that umbrella, if they said, what do you mean, understand everything? I could have given a demonstration, or understand the nature of reality and why we're here. Or then understand, I would have picked one as a demonstration, understand our destiny, our purpose. They might have said, what do you mean by that? Division. So definition, demonstration, I gave an example. That might not have been enough. Division. We can make rational where we came from, where we're going, what we should be doing here. We can make rational, we can understand for ourselves the nature of ourself, the nature of consciousness, the nature of enlightenment, the nature of spirituality. And we can verify that understanding in direct experience and gain knowledge, experience it, bliss out in that experience of knowledge, of nous, of noesis. So these are all the divisions. Now, if I'm talking with someone, one of those might light the spark in them. Wait a minute. You can understand and know what happens when you die? Oh, that's interesting. I haven't heard that before. So that would be the one that I would pull out of that division stage, synthesize all of those ideas to it, and then take it back. Yeah, so that's one reason why you could get into philosophy. You can know what happens when you die. So, my answer was to discover that we live in a understandable reality. Now, the other thing I could have said was to discover we can verify understanding and knowledge. That's a big one. So we're not just left with theories or opinions. There is nous, which also makes sense of all of these mysterious Eastern spiritual traditions. Like, what the heck is Buddhism? What are these Shaolin monks doing with their kung fu and their meditation? What is these Dragon Ball Z characters doing with their ki? Oh, it's so mysterious. Gets rid of the mystery. Well, I mean, makes the mystery more accessible, let's say. It's still curious, it's still interesting. But it makes it accessible for us, all of us. You don't have to sit under a waterfall for 20 hours a day in meditation. You don't have to go live in the bears and become an ascetic, live with the bears in the woods. Just by philosophy. Living life this way. Applying the logos and the virtues in everything we do, whatever we do. You are engaged in the best kind of spiritual tradition, which also is interesting. I've heard stories of people who were philosophers who had the logos with them, go to ashrams where they normally meditate, and usually for someone to have an experience of nous would be rare. Enlightenment experiences are rare. But this person introducing the logos allowed people to understand what was blocking them in their meditation and also make sense of what they were experiencing, allowing for more people to pop off, to have an experience of nous. So not only does it make Eastern spirituality, inverted commas, more accessible to us, rational to us, but more able to be achieved. So that's another reason why philosophy is so great. It makes accessible, higher experiences of consciousness and reality. Another reason I would say is something that I've been talking about a lot lately, how wonderful and beautiful it is that it makes things simple. All of the many things. Oh, and by the way, this is one of the ploys that lovers of opinion, lovers of the body, lovers of their own riches or fame, lovers of fighting and debate bros, philonikos, one of their tools to oppress is to make you feel like you can't understand it because it's too complicated. Wealth inequality, no, it's too complicated. Oh, it's inflation. Hang on a second, isn't it very simple? That we have a system of corruption which takes money from everyone and gives it to a few families? No, it's complicated. You can't understand it. Shut up. Go away. Let us keep doing what we're doing. Law, justice, couldn't there be a better way of restoring justice and not punitive justice? Like right now in America, they're making homelessness illegal, making a pipeline into the prison system where they are manipulated for slave labor to make profits, instead of actually addressing the cause of solving the problem. Can't we hang on a second? This is wrong, obviously. And couldn't we just simply understand the cause of problems and address them? Why is there corruption? Why is there extreme wealth inequality? Why do we feel like capitalism is somehow good when it ends up with, like monopoly, one person owning everything, producing the most terrible goods that are designed to break and are polluting the environment, and so on and so on. All of the many reasons that it's terrible. Oh no, you can't understand. You're not an economist. It's inflation. Or the justice system. Oh, no, you don't understand the legal system. There are all these books. You have to study for 10 years to be a lawyer. And come back then. Philosophy, the same thing. You're not a philosopher. You can't simply just read the Phaedo and have fun with it with your friends. Develop your own curiosity and puzzles. You can't take whatever you learn about the logos and dialectic and apply it to your life just to purify your problems. That's a psychologist. That's what he does. You need to get a degree in psychology to do that. You can't just follow along with this channel and read and see yourself evolving as you go You need to learn about Kant and Hegel and all these European dudes and Nietzsche and all these long, boring, stupid, poorly worded books that are written in a language that originally that you have no access to. Come back in 50 years when somehow you've managed to read all those, ignoring the fact that very few people in capitalism have time to do that. And it's boring and no one wants to. You have to have a certain special kind of autism to be attracted to that kind of reading because there's no meaning in it. You'd love philosophy, but this is a way of beating the joy of learning out of you by making it complicated and diverse. Why? So they can maintain their power, keep things the way that they were, hold on to their blind loyalty to the way things were. Inside cave good, same problem. And why can't they offer anything good? Actual justice, actual healthy society of commerce, actual healthy psychology, actual healthy philosophy. What are they missing? You guessed it, the art of the logos. See how simple it is. But that's the nature of hierarchical understanding systems, and therefore that's the nature of the logos. The higher you get up, the more causal you are, the more primary it is, the more simple it becomes. Now, there could be a certain benefit of wading through the complex in order to get to the simple, because when you reach the simple, now you have a way of making sense of all of those complicated things. You have a way of making sense of the justice system, of the economic system, of the political system, of the education system, and so on and so on. Because those were questions you brought with you along the way, so when you reach what is simple, you have a way of making sense of all of them. You have a wider reach and scope. But when you get there, when it's simple, when we get to a point in our text, I think we're 42 maybe episodes in, when we get to somewhere like this where it's, hey, this is the art of the logos. Wow. Owen Wilson would say, wow. And then he would say, wow. And then he might say, wow. Wow. So what's the appeal of philosophy? It makes things so simple. Carry it with your back pocket. Try it out. Facing a problem. Is this the absence of the art of the logos? The way Socrates says, by the way, if you don't use the art of the logos in judging people, because everyone has a problem, the shadow that they're here to solve. Everyone has some level of development. Even gurus who have high states of mind are still some level. But no one is completely worthless and no one is completely enlightened. Maybe Socrates. Those are the rarest ones. So maybe no one isn't. In the text he says they're extremely rare. Just like the extremely ugly and extremely beautiful, extremely tall and extremely short, even in dogs. So everyone is somewhere along that continuum, where you're at and where you're stuck. So you have to use that in judging whether a person is trustworthy. Even if they're family, even if they're your best friend. So you don't come to the conclusion that it's not your lack of the art of the logos in judging at fault, it's humans. Humans suck. You don't want to go down that road. Just like with the logos, it's not that there is nothing understandable, there is no ultimate reality, and there is no skill or artful use of the logos to reach ultimate reality. It's not that this doesn't exist, it's that you don't have the art yet. Or you're at some level of development of the art, and you have some level of block so far. So simple. the art of the Logos. So, in where we're reading, Simius begins with just trust, and we did our little dialectic on it, saying that trust is important because trust itself synthesizes and unifies all of the other key terms in the text, talking about how Socrates was relating to the Logos. He calls it in, he receives it, he watches it even as it unfolds through his mouth. All of those things, for that to happen, you have to trust the Logos. So we did a little dialectic, and wow, trust the Logos is synthesis and a way of understanding the Logos better. Analysis. But then we happen to do that, and magically or coincidentally, or of course we know it's not coincidence, there's the Logos at play. Providentially, the next paragraph was Socrates saying, hey, by the way, you can't just trust the Logos, as if he anticipated our conclusion. You have to have the art of the Logos too. So, which shines a light on everything we read up to that. Because Socrates was saying, I trust I'm going to a good place. I trust I'm going to be with better men and gods than here. So when he says trust, we know that he must also be using the art of the Logos. He also talks about understanding and direct experience and the spiritual initiation. So it's likely he has that behind him. So he's not just trusting it for trust's sake or faith. He understands it and therefore trusts it. He's experienced it and therefore trusts what's going to happen. And now we can say he has the art of the Logos, helping him to trust it. So, Simius trusted the argument that our soul is immortal, but then brought up the cultural or religious belief or religious mythology that the soul is more like harmony. It's a byproduct of our physical body, and therefore is going to go when we die. And then Socrates led him through a series of arguments for him to share in the art of the Logos and hopefully learn the art of the Logos himself. So when he finished, he said, he concludes, Okay, let me get the actual terminology here. He concludes, after going through the reasoning with Socrates, Alright, I can't see it in the text yet, but he comes to a conclusion that he's not going to be convinced by himself or another person having gone through the argument in this way. So hopefully he's learning the art of the Logos, and it's what we have to do. So last time we showed that the argument of learning as recollection is inconsistent with the idea that the soul is like harmony. So we have to pick one or the other. And there is beautiful and good and necessary reasons that all learning is remembering, whereas what makes the idea of the soul being like harmony a byproduct of the physical body is just that it seems probable or it seems attractive. It's familiar to us. So we have to improve our standards to the art of the Logos. So that's where we're jumping in. We are jumping in at the end of Simmias, and they've vanquished that argument, and they've mythologized it with the Theban god Harmonia. So this is what we do. Once we understand it, we have to use like a mnemonic device, make it easy to remember. So that's mythology. So can you think of a god in a story? For them, it's the gods. We might pick a superhero or a Harry Potter character, if that's the universe you're into, to represent that whole thing. So we'll be talking today about philosophy makes things so simple. That's what mythology does too. That whole argument we went through, we need to make it our own. And once we have made it our own, we need to give it a name. That's mythology. The name that Socrates gives it is Harmonia, the Theban goddess Harmonia. So if I say, hey, I was thinking about Harmonia the other day, all of those arguments and all of the implications and all of the consequences of this opinion, and how it's going to relate to your fear of death, and how it's going to relate to whether you develop a hatred of the logos and not reach truth in being. All of those key points put together. And if I just say, hey, Harmonia, you all of it. Just like if I say the word duck, everything that you know about duck is brought to the surface. They fly, they sound funny, they waddle in a cute way, they eat breadcrumbs. I don't have to go through it all, I can just say the word duck. So too, Harmonia, that whole argument, we can say that's Harmonia. That's the importance of mythology. It makes things simple and easy to remember. Mnemonic device. So, we've vanquished Harmonia. Now we're on to that Simmias's argument. Our soul is not just, our consciousness is not just a byproduct of our physical neurons. It can't be. We have addressed Harmonia. Now we have to address Seebe's argument that we don't outlive our last coat. In one life, or if there are many incarnations, it's the same idea. So we have to look, is Socrates going to mythologize that with a character name? And is he going to walk us through that argument to vanquish the logos? In definition, in argument, demonstrate the art of the logos in how he does it. How is he demonstrating himself? How is he bringing him along? Is he fighting him? Is he making him feel bad? Is he appealing to the majority? Is he trying to shame him? Is he using ad hominem? Is he saying, oh, you've got a problem in your past, therefore you suck? You're cancelled? Or as though there are some humans who don't have problems. That's absurd. Everyone has a problem. It's just a matter of, do we have the integrity to understand and free ourselves from it? That's the only difference. Through the art of the logos. Again, art of the logos, so simple. Does he do any of those things? Or does he encourage him? Does he help him to see that he's capable? He has a divine and noble nature. He can share in the logos. He can reach being, and he can himself, those three things, that there is a being he can reach, truth being, there is a logos he can share in, and there is an art he can learn. The three things that are rejected by the others. Does he do that in how he demonstrates his dialectic? And as we go, can we divide up the parts of both? Divide up the parts of the argument and divide up the ways that he's functioning so that we can ourselves find a way of synthesizing that into the art of the logos for us. We need to play the game. We need to put on our explorer hats and our Sherlock Holmes scarf, I don't know, and be a detective, be an explorer, and play the game too. Match him in that division step. So that's where we are, and that's where we're going to jump in. Let's go. Okay, so let's go back a paragraph or so and pick up from the end of the argument. And just as a reminder, the argument was, if the soul itself is a kind of harmony, then what about the virtues? Because we can understand the virtues as the harmony of the soul and its functioning. Now, that's interesting. We've already talked about earlier, we mentioned this fascinating ploy that philosophers use. In answering a question, they'll bring in the higher and more profound. So when we talked about whether or not the soul, the first time we addressed this argument, whether or not the soul dissipates upon death, Socrates said, well, only composite things break up. Like physical things, composite, made up of many parts. Is the soul composite or is it incomposite, like being? So we're going to have to learn what being is and learn what the body is, so we can say whether the soul is more like one or the other. So he smuggled in an understanding, a lesson, the division needed for us to discover what being is. He gave us a gift. He gave us a puzzle to solve. He smuggled in the higher when answering the question of the lower. I love when Socrates does this. Oh, you want to know the soul? Okay. Well, it's either like the body, or it's either like the body or the being. So let's understand what being is, and then we'll see if the soul is like it. We got to understand being? That's amazing. Okay, so that was the first time. And the soul is more like being, in that it's more pure. You don't see it. It's more divine, more beautiful. Therefore, the soul is more likely incomposite, like being. But the counter argument to that, which had a bit of a sting, because it seems familiar or probable, so maybe it reflects Simmias's own religious upbringing or his religious mythology, was hang on a second, there's another thing which is more you don't see with your eyes and is more beautiful and divine and pure. The harmony you play on a guitar. He uses lyre, but I'm going to use guitar because who plays a lyre nowadays? Plus, I got a guitar in there. I play guitar. I love guitar. Excuse me. The harmony a guitar makes is more beautiful and pure and divine. But that's the first thing to go when your strings start to go out of tune. So maybe the soul is like harmony. But in addressing this counter-argument, this is what we have to vanquish. Socrates smuggled in an interesting clue for us. He says, by the way, vice and virtue, couldn't we say they are a kind of harmony themselves? Oh, what? This is a big deal. Because Socrates' doctrine about philosophy being the art and practice of death and dying, and being a kind of purification in that activity, and that you do through dianoia, which is the exercise of the dialectic and logos, which makes you more like nous, so that the divine self can then let you into that experience of nous. All that was his doctrine, but then he did a whole big section about virtue and vice. He went on to explain the shadows of virtue, what we call virtue in our everyday world. What people, and of course, he talked about courage and sound-mindedness and what people think they are, but how that's actually vice. And then recently he talked about wisdom. People claim to be wise and smart, but they're not. They're actually the opposite. And then we concluded, oh, hang on a second, yeah, that's because they're lacking the art of the logos. In fact, the people who we claim are wise and clever spend their time contradicting the logos. Look how smart they are. They can contradict the experts. Oh, they must know what they're talking about. Look at how they yell at the people on the screen and on Fox News or any news network. Look at them. Look how angry and contradictory this guy is. He must be clever. That's kind of what passes as wisdom nowadays. But it's not, it's the vice version. So, And then, of course, he said, by the way, all that doctrine about reaching truth and being is only part of what philosophers seek. We also seek phronesis. So the virtues are a big section. What are the virtues? What makes them different from vice? And how do we have them ourselves so that we can upgrade them to phronesis? Thumbs up. So, here he is talking about you can understand the difference between vice and virtue as harmony or discord within the soul, of the soul. That's a huge clue. We want to understand the virtues. We want phronesis. We don't want to be bad. We don't want to have vice and nail our souls to vice, which will negatively affect us, our state of mind, our clear seeing and understanding now, and our reincarnation. And it will prevent us from reaching truth and being. So we really want to understand what virtue and vice is. Again, side A, what it is, side B, what it isn't, vice. We need to understand both. And he gave us a huge clue here. It's harmony. Coincidence? I don't think so. There are many ways in which he could have vanquished this idea that the soul is harmony. He chose this one. Why? See, this is a puzzle. I'm going to share a personal anecdote. I was once at a class, a philosophy class that Dr. Pierre Grimes was teaching in the States. And now, in mainstream culture, they don't teach real philosophy. In fact, the people there were doing philosophy of ethics because it was required for business. Most people at colleges want to get riches or fame, lovers of the body. So we're in the vice side of humanity right now. That's the way things are at most colleges. So the philosophy department was just, for most people, it was just ethics, because capitalism is fundamentally unethical. Maximizing personal profit for a small group of people at the expense of the enslavement and the exploitation of others. That's the definition of capitalism, including externalizing the costs of production, meaning if you can get other people to pay for your pollution, then good. It's unsustainable, it's exploitative, it's corrupt, it's fundamentally unethical. It's a system that shouldn't be. Or rather, it should be if we lack the dialectic or the art of the logos. This necessarily follows. We would have a fundamentally unethical and corrupt system of oppression and destruction of humanity and humans. So there's a kind of justice in that this is what follows if we don't have the art of the logos. And if we're playing out in real time a dialectic, we need both. Fortunately, in the last 5 years, as we've been talking about, we have this text that I'm showing to my left here, giving us what we need to go from what it isn't to what it is, to pick up the art of the logos and solve these problems. So everyone, hey, even the most tyrannical, greedy dragons that sit on their pile of wealth, letting rest of humanity suffer, even they will benefit by the removal of capitalism. They don't know it yet because they're not a lover of learning, they're a lover of riches. But everyone will benefit by the art of the logos. That's the nature of the logos. It's not the physical logos of back and forth of zero-sum game. Your richness depends on everybody else failing or suffering, being poor. It's everyone wins in the art of the logos. Socrates and his friends, as opposed to debate bros or lovers of Philonikos, lovers of fighting, who win. My opinion rules. Professional opinions havers. The ones that say, I'm a realist. I love that expression because it means I agree with all of my own opinions. I'm a realist. Like usually they have very little, if not any, usually they have no understanding of reality in the true sense. but they think that their opinions are real, so they call themselves realists. I find that funny. So because we have this text, we can go from what it isn't to what it is. The implications that we talked about in all of these institutions to a utopia, really. And of course, the people who call themselves smart contradict the Logos. So they think that they're clever by saying, utopia is impossible. Look how wise I am to just contradict the ideal. There is no such thing as utopia. It's a fantasy. Yeah, well, yeah, bullshit. It's easy to just crap on everything. But what if there is? And it's rational and understandable and accessible to all. Okay? Silly games these people play. Now, so because of this society we're in, most people were doing philosophy because of ethics as an obligation paper, because of course capitalism is unethical. And so normally when talking about ethics, you'd pick an example like, is it ethical to steal a loaf of bread to feed your starving family? That kind of thing. Very milquetoast, very average, very boring. But this particular teacher picked an example that would be most relevant and beneficial to the souls of all of the humans in his class. He picked a very strange example, relevant to all of them. A certain lie that they fundamentally have, a certain mythology they have about the nature of the soul, about the nature of God, and about the nature of sin, that the people in this class got from the understanding of the story of the Garden of Eden, that human sins came because the wicked woman convinced Adam to eat the apple, and therefore they got banished. Therefore, inequality and suffering is a response of, it's our own fault. We are innately sinners. And by the way, it's women's fault too, so we can oppress women. But God is good. Now that's what everybody in that class thought was the story, but we read the text and it was the opposite. They weren't both banished. God was the one who was the villain in that story. The snake told the truth. The apple was the apple of knowledge. Why would God not want people to be knowledge? Because in the text, because they would become like gods. Why is that a bad thing? And also there is the fruit of eternity. Why would we not want to be immortal? In fact, philosophy seeks reaching that level of God, the divine realm of being, and immortality and eternity. This is in our dialectic of being. And in the text, there were many gods. So Christianity, that story, is a polytheistic tradition. But it's taught as monotheistic. So the priests and the people in charge fundamentally lied about pretty much every aspect of that story in Genesis, the opening story, causing terrible implications. The idea of it's our fault that we have sin, that heaven isn't here, but we're cast out of the garden, that women are somehow at fault for our suffering, that the devil is the snake and he lies, he's a liar. He was the only one telling the truth in that story. That God is good. No, he's angry and vengeful and stupid. Why do they lie? So his question was, is that ethical for the clergy and the people who are authorities of the Christian church to lie to all of us about the Garden of Eden story? Is that ethical or unethical? Keep in mind, these are young people who are very influenced by this fundamental false belief. Ignorance, the shadow of where they're stuck. So he looked at where they're at and where they're stuck, and he picked an example that would be most needed and beneficial and good for them. And not some random, is it good to steal bread to feed your family nonsense. So I experienced that first, in real time, and it was pretty cool. It was really cool to see. challenging for a lot of the students there. But something I hadn't seen. I'd been in a lot of philosophy classes in my time, and I hadn't seen that before. But Socrates is doing it here. He picked the kind of way of addressing the difficulty, the question in it, the kind of way of answering the question, whether or not soul is a harmony, by picking the thing that would be most needed for us. Virtue. Because we need to learn virtue. We don't just need to learn about the yoga and about dianoia and understanding, and we also need to learn about how we can apply our learning, demonstrate it every day and always, because that's the virtues. Because when you have both of them together, you can give birth to phronesis, a kind of learning and a kind of way of being that doesn't lose its power, is more divine, is innate, and is therefore a learning we can take with us. So if we're here to learn, the Greek word paideia, we're here to learn something important. Pi day. Every day is a pie day. Every day we get to eat lovely pie in philosophy, so paideia. Then this would be a part of it, or it. This would be fundamental to the learning, because we can take it with us. And Socrates is going to take something with him into the next life so he can fare well and have divine providence. That's what Phaedo said at the beginning. So isn't that cool? He's doing that here. So we've learned something about virtue. It's something to do with harmony. Vice is disharmony. And we looked at the snowman, the different parts of the soul. They all have to be harmonized. They all have to be singing the same note. You have to be desiring the same thing as you hold on with courage, with your temperance. Desiring the one thing. Not being at discord, desiring many things. So discord as a part, I want this, but I also want this. I want to do philosophy. Oh yeah, but I also want to sell out and become famous or something. Discord within the part. But also discord within the whole. If you're desiring something different than what you're outward moving, this part of the soul, the middle part, your outward moving in your activities as seeking is different from what you're inwardly desiring, there's a discord there. You're going to be at odds. You're going to lose power. You're going to lose focus. You're going to be having vice. And of course, the third part of our soul, our thinking, our planning, and our ruling, well, that should be following the same thing too, seeking the same thing. What can we desire? What can we seek in our activities? And what can we use for our thinking and planning? How about, this is our hypothesis we're running with at the moment, how about the art of the logos? Maybe. That's what we're running with. So, he snuck in an interesting, important lesson for us. Vice is something to do with harmony. And therefore, if the soul is harmony itself by nature, it can't be discord. Because a soul is a soul. Whether it's your soul or my soul, it's the same, it's of the same nature. So if its nature is harmony, it can't have vice, because vice's nature is disharmony. So if they agree that virtue is harmony and vice is discord, then the soul can't be harmony. Because if a soul was harmony, then every soul would be the same. There'd be no difference between vice and virtue. Which is interesting, something that often a lot of people try and pass off as wisdom today. Trump is no more or less virtuous than anybody else, even though he comically represents pretty much every vice. But if there is such a thing, it can't be the soul. Because if the soul is harmony, it can't at the same time be discord. So, that's where we're at. And to show that the soul rules, and another argument he said is, by the way, if it is harmony, it can't be doing something different than its parts as telling it to do. In other words, guitar harmony has to harmonize the note that the tension of the string is allowing. So it's kind of a slave to how tight the string is. You can't have a really loose string and play a really high note. It doesn't work that way. But our body is different because our body might seek things that our soul says, nah, it's not good for you to do that. You can't eat all of the pies. No, every day is a pie day. Every day is pie day. You can't eat all of the cookies. And so, again, we're looking for clues or hints that he smuggles into the argument that might stand out to us as not being necessarily necessary, but helpful for us to see other things. So let's see if he smuggles something in here. By the way, so the harmony is to do with the tightening or strumming of the guitar. Sometimes that which rules the soul, especially if she has phronesis. So phronesis, here's another clue. Why did he... What governs the soul? What governs in a human being? Is it the soul? Especially if one has phronesis. So another clue about our question, what's phronesis? Doesn't the soul appear to be acting in the opposite way when she rules over the affections of which self is composed, the body, and so opposing nearly all but a few throughout all of life? Yeah, if we just followed our impulses, we'd be madmen. We'd be totally hedonistic and unhealthy and crazy. So we oppose nearly all but a few throughout our life, and by mastering their ways, and at times she corrects more harshly with the suffering that accompanies physical training and medical treatments. Why did he smuggle those two ideas in? We've been talking about purification and perfection, physical training and medical treatments, which would be a physical analogy to what would be the equivalent to physical training and medical treatments. Medical treatment, sickness to health; physical training, health to excellence. Could it be? Other times she corrects more gently and then uses threats. So he said, hey, if you eat all those cookies, I'm going to make you go to the gym. No, again, that's physical training. I don't know. Don't eat the cookie, fatty, we might say to ourselves. Sometimes she advises using dialectical conversation with the desires, angers, fears, as if she were one resource talking to another. So if there is something different from our physical body that can engage in dialectic, then our soul is not our body. We're different. Of course, those who haven't gone through this reasoning might identify with their body, get really interested in their appearance, judging others by just their appearance, physical beauty only, but identify with their body. And of course, the more you identify the body, the more you're going to fear death. But she's one resource talking to another. So whatever is us that relates to our body in different ways at different times, go to the gym, go to the dentist, go to the doctor, but also reason with ourselves. Hey, do you really want all those cookies? What's the cause here? Then we are not our body. So we're learning more about the soul, but also he's dropping in these two terms, physical training and medical treatments. Interesting. And he's linking advising, ruling with dialectical conversation. The first time he dropped that word. So some clues here. Didn't need to drop those in. Just like Dr. Grimes didn't need to talk about the Garden of Eden. He could have talked about whether or not stealing bread to feed your family is ethical. Didn't need to, but he did. Why drop in dialectic? Puzzle, question. Take it with us. So, and he also he referred back to, again, for him, he's correcting or referring to Homer, which is their kind of spirituality or religion at the time. And the example I gave is our modern version, Christianity, at least in the States, in America. So while Dr. Grimes picked out a Christian mythology and addressed that or corrected that or used that, so too Socrates is pulling out what's relevant to their mythology. A key term all the way through the Phaedo has been mythology. Socrates says he's going to explain and mythologize. He encourages us to do a dialectic and mythologize it. At the end of this, he mythologizes this whole argument with the Theban goddess Harmonia. So he brings in, isn't that interesting? There's a significance. Why did he didn't need to bring in Odysseus. Didn't need to bring in Homer. So that question is why? Because if we want the art of the Logos, what might we bring in that it might not be necessary but might be part of the art of the Logos, helping ourselves and helping our friends? Curious puzzle, right? So, in the story, Odysseus beats his breast. Come on, you've endured far worse than this. You can handle it, heart. Okay, but the soul leads and masters the affections of the body, being self according to self. Okay, so it has its own existence, and he uses that word that's in the dialectic, self according to self. Interesting. Is there a reason for that? And much more divine resource than harmony. So while harmony is kind of more divine than your physical strings, the soul is even more divine than that. Yes, by Zeus. So he's using Zeus in his language. So does the language that we use, that the person that, so when we're talking to someone with the art of the Logos, should the language they're using give us guidance? If he's saying by Zeus, if it's part of his language, is part of his idiosyncratic, his personal way of talking, then how did you learn about Zeus? Was it from Homer? Therefore, should I bring in Homer? Are you telling me part of your background, your mythology that needs to be purified? It's worth noting, because we want to develop the art too. And become the greatest heroes. And allow Socrates to be the greatest heroes by passing it on to us. So we're an active participant in Socrates' legacy. Take notice then, oh my noble friend. Oh, remember earlier today, we talked about those who love Philonikos, those who love fighting and contention, often want to put people down, cancel them, attack them, ignore the Logos and just attack you personally. Whereas we said, oh, but in philosophy, we want to help people recognize they have a divine and noble nature. Divine of the nature of being, which is where we're at, what everything wants to get to, which is our goal. But noble has the potential to go beyond the divine, beyond God. That's why we talk about the self. Hey, you don't have to believe, you have to, make arguments for the existence of God, but do you have to be convinced you have a self? It literally reaches beyond belief. So, noble and divine. Here he's saying, oh my noble friend. So we threw that out as a hypothesis, and here we have a kind of confirmation as we read, which is why we read. We can no longer maintain in a beautiful way, again standard, beauty is a standard, that soul is harmony. For as it is reasonable, we would neither agree with the divine poet Homer, nor selves with ourselves. So we have to be in agreement with ourselves. Selves with selves, self according to self. We have to be the first part of the dialectic. Agree self with self. Agree with yourself. Trust yourself. Trust yourself logos. Trust the self logos. Trust your arguments through the art of the logos. Necessarily. By the way, if you agree with yourself, if you agree self with self, is that a kind of harmony? Therefore, a kind of virtue? It has to be in this way, says Simmias. Very well then. On the other hand, on the one hand, goodness. Very well then, the followers of the Theban Harmonia. Hey, okay, let's. How do I pronounce this? Harmonias is the person, and in English we say harmonia. I think. Let me just look. Harmonia, yeah. Harmonia is the name for this Theban goddess. Has somehow become gracious in a measured way to us, as it is reasonable. Whereas, how and by what logos, O Simmias and Cebes, can we truly gain favor from the followers of Cadmus? So here's our translation from Harmonia to Cadmus. Now, as we're doing, we're going to read it in the lobe first to get the sort of English, the flowing reading a little bit, and then we're going to jump into Balboa. That will help us understand the technical, the specifics in the Balboa. Very well, said Socrates. Harmonia, the Theban goddess, has, it seems, been moderately gracious to us. But how, Cebes, and by what argument can we find grace in the sight of Cadmus? I think, said Cebes, you will find a way. At any rate, you conducted this argument against harmony wonderfully and better than I expected. So this is another thing we've talked about. Phaedo said it was unexpected, the arguments that followed. So this is a repetition. Repetition is one way of presenting a clue. So if we want to be daemon-like or follow the logos or have the art of the logos, we have to put ourselves in a state of mind to share in or channel that which is unexpected, which seems like a higher level of inspiration or functioning, because their arguments are unexpected. So it's an interesting way of being. For when Simmias was telling of his difficulty, I wondered if anyone could make head against his argument. So it seemed to me very remarkable that it could not withstand the first attack of your argument. Now I should be not surprised if the argument of Cadmus met with the same fate. My friend, said Socrates, do not be boastful, lest some evil eye put to rout the argument that is to come. Don't jinx us. That, however, is in the hands of God. Interesting. God, the logos is coming from God, not him. No wonder he's watching it and calling it in and so on, receiving it, he said before, trusting it with art. Let us in Homeric fashion charge the foe and set the worth of what you say. Now, the sum total of what you seek is this. You demand a proof that our soul is indestructible and immortal. So where you at and where you stuck, where we start, right? If the philosopher who is confident in the face of death and who thinks that after death he will fare better in the other world than if he has lived his life differently, is not to find his confidence senseless and foolish. He's talking about himself. He thinks he will fare better in the other world. based on how we lived in this world. And we've also been learning ourselves what we should be doing, the art of the logos, the virtues, not nailing our soul to the body by seeking pleasures and desires, that kind of thing. And although we show that the soul is strong and godlike and existed before we men were born as men, he's happy with these. Of course, it's stronger than our body. Our soul sticks around after our body changes heaps. And in incarnations, if you see the necessity for reincarnation, and it's more divine, that was an argument we talked about earlier, it's not composite, and existed before we were born as men, that's the logos of learning. And also the other ones he brought forward, we had to come from somewhere. And the logos of back and forth, if we're being alive and being dead, there's also a coming to be alive and being dead. Like being alive and dying is an opposite. And also the Enderman argument. It has to be circular, otherwise we'll all end up at the same endpoint. Everyone would be asleep like Enderman, who was famously asleep. So, you agree that the soul is strong and godlike, and existed before we were born as men. All this, you say, we may bear witness not to immortality, but only to the fact that the soul lasts a long while. Maybe this is another option, just a long while, and existed somewhere an immensely long time before our birth, and knew and did various things, yet it was none the more immortal for all that. But so those similar arguments, you can say, well, yeah, I mean, reincarnation, but not necessarily immortality. Just doing a bunch of stuff before we were born doesn't mean it's immortal. But its very entrance into the human body was the beginning of its dissolution, a disease, as it were, and it lives in toil through this life and finally perishes in what we call death. Yeah, this life can wear us down, right? Especially if we don't have the art of the logos to understand and solve problems. The new paradigm in solving problems, or the new paradigm in psychotherapy. And we have the book Philosophical Midwifery, which outlines that. Then yeah, our illnesses or our depression or our states of mind or our problems can wear us down. But even just through life, experiences wear us down, don't they? Make us more tired as we grow older. Finally, perishing in what we call death. So I'm relating it to our modern experiences and our modern understanding the same way Socrates is relating it to what's relevant to these dudes. And Homer. The same way Dr. Grimes related his question to the Garden of Eden in Christianity. We have to find it. We have to look for the meaning. We have to apply it. That's the demonstration. Not just defined in a reading, but can you find demonstrations in your life? How is this like what you might feel sometimes? How is it like what you hear often? At school or on the media or in your religious mythology that you grew up with? Now, it makes no difference, you say, whether a soul enters into a body once or many times. So far as the fear of each of us feels is concerned, for anyone, unless he is a fool, must fear if he does not know and cannot prove that the soul is immortal. Whether we get worn down by this lifetime or it's the end of our reincarnations, even if there is reincarnation. Unless you are a fool, you must fear death. Unless you can prove the soul is immortal. So again, let's demonstrate it. How does this play out in our lives? Well, here's something that I hear often. Nobody has ever come back from the dead, so we can't know what happens in the afterlife. We can't know if there's a heaven, or if it's a Mormon heaven, or a Muslim heaven, or a Protestant heaven. We can't know. We can't prove that. You can't even prove. So just, pick a belief, hedge your bets. Pick a religion. Usually it's your parents' one, interestingly enough. Or atheists. Well, you can't know what happens when you die, so live in the now. And unless you can prove the soul is immortal, you're a fool if you don't fear death. So the big fear we're trying to overcome, like a child's fear of the boogeyman, the song we have to sing until we overcome this fear is about our fear of death. Big one. You have to prove the soul is immortal, so setting the stakes for himself in his opening introduction. So, within this introduction, so he's just saying, okay, definition. I am going to address Cadmus, the god Cadmus. Now, demonstration, the opening. So there should be contained within this next step, the demonstration, all of what will follow, and also promises. So we're learning about the structure of thinking and talking. Also, it will illuminate the text. Is there in the Phaedo a definition at the beginning? Is there in the Phaedo, in the opening paragraph or the opening section, something that, when Socrates and Phaedo are talking about what it was like before they even met Socrates, before they even got into the prison, what it was like, how they waited outside, all that sort of stuff. Could that have the same structure as this? So we're using a part to understand the whole. Because, as we saw, there is a certain true understandable logos. If there is, it should be in everything. In music and geometry, but also in how Socrates talks in a particular argument, and how the whole text is as a whole. As above, so below. In the part, as in the whole. Macrocosm to microcosm. This principle. Another way of saying the same thing. Terms may vary, relations stay the same. Necessarily. That's how analogy works. There has to be some sameness of relationship between a shepherd and a sheep, as with the king and his people. Terms are varied, but relations stay the same. That allows for analogy and therefore allows for thinking. Important for us because we start in the physical world. We have to look for certain kinds of relationships between the terms we see here. Justice, beauty, soul, death, and then apply those relations to the terms of the higher realm, what exists in the realm of being. So we can learn about it. The more we learn about it, that's our understanding applied to being. That's called dianoia. And the more we do dianoia, Socrates has said in this text, the more we are becoming like nous. The more we are becoming purified ourselves, and making us ready for the divine self to invite us into that realm. So as above, so below. Terms may vary, relations stay the same. So that's why we can play the game, because we're looking for patterns. See a pattern here, apply the same relations to different terms. That's what we do all the time with our triads, with our skill trees, our triads and duads and so forth, because look at what we did last time. Here's 1, 2, here's my pen. Here's pen. Let's get red. Here's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different terms. But same relations. So we understood Hermes, how he relates to Aphrodite and Apollo by understanding how the being or ruling term relates to power and activity. Relations stay the same, terms may vary. We also applied it to the triad that he gave us with the relating to the art of the logos. Our soul has the good, has nous, and has the virtues. And we also have the potential to be bad, unenlightened, and wickedness or vice. So is the virtues a kind of activity, pulling a term from another set, but with the same relationships? Also, can wickedness be its shadow? Again, there's our right angle of the ladder and its shadow, and everybody being somewhere in between here, the extremes being rare. This is what we use the art of the logos to determine. Where are you in here? Like, if you're into basketball, they have things like games played and points. You're somewhere up here and somewhere here. So, lots of points, but only a few games played. Lots of games played, but only a few points. Everybody's somewhere in there. So we're using this thing. I mean, that's just how a graph works. X-axis and Y-axis for our logos and pathologos. Towards being and the shadow of being. We are all of us somewhere in here. These, well, not all of us, these are rare. The most worthless and the completed, like Socrates, these are rare. So don't hate people because there are only a few Socrates. Don't hate people because there are a few completely mired in their problem and have no interest in learning. Don't blame people because this is the way that the world is. There's a justice to this in a certain way. Blame your lack of the art of the logos to be able to judge and see. And also relate in a beneficial way. Like a doctor doesn't get mad at people because some people get sick. Or people at a certain level of problems or sickness, but also a certain level of excellence. You might have no illnesses, but be very unfit. You might have sore back, but be otherwise, because you've played a lot of sport, you got a sore back, but you're very fit, so you're up here somewhere. It's part of the art of medicine. Part of the art of the logos when applied to the ladder and its shadow. So, the shadow, bad, shadow of the good. The shadow of nous, the way we can apprehend being with that cognitive thing. Unenlightened. Oh, we can understand something about this term. So another benefit of relations constant, terms may vary, is you can understand more about those terms. Oh, just like you can understand more about a king by seeing how a king relates to his people, by looking at how a shepherd relates to his sheep. So too can we learn more about what nous is, something to do with enlightenment. So maybe nous is the logos or understanding of what enlightenment actually is. Which again is one of the reasons why I love philosophy. It makes things simple and accessible. It's not mysterious. It's not woo-woo or airy-fairy. Enlightenment isn't whatever crazy Aunt Jill wants it to be. For her, enlightenment means realizing that the birds are Jesus, whatever. Or enlightenment means being in the present. Maybe enlightenment can be understood and it's not a matter of opinion or how many followers you can convince. Maybe it's just understandable, it's simple and open to all because we all have a divine and noble nature. So we've been doing this. So that's the idea of as above, so below, or relations, they're the same, terms may vary. We are in this one. So, and that's why we are curious about what he's saying here in this passage. And if that can shed light on, this one. Can this opening paragraph here shed light on the opening paragraph in the text itself? So again, we're seeing the importance of why when we learn something new, we can go back to the start, just like the end of the dialectic, and look at it again in a new way. Sing to the self every day. Repeat. Read a text 100 times. That's the Chinese saying. To master a text, you have to read it 100 times. But now the thing about philosophy is we can judge whether these sayings are real or not, because we can use the art of the logos to see why they're real or not. That's a cool thing. So, the entrance into the human body is the beginning of its dissolution, a disease as it were, and it lives in toil through life and finally perishes in what we call death. Now it makes no difference, you say, whether a soul enters into a body once or many times, so far as the fear each of us feel is concerned. Addressing our fear. Or anyone, unless he's a fool, must fear, and if he does not know, number one, and cannot prove. So there's our knowing, and there's our logos. Art of the logos. So maybe the art of logos has both. That the soul is immortal. So the two rungs of the ladder, nous and dianoia, knowing and understanding. Know and prove. That Cadmus is, I think, that the soul is immortal. That, Cebes, is, I think, what you mean. And I restate it purposefully. He's telling us, he's doing this for a reason. That nothing may escape us. And that you may, if you wish, add or take away anything. So, he's telling us, I'm doing this, the introduction, for a reason. So that nothing may escape us. What is the thing that must not escape us? Well, 2 levels, right? He's operating at 2 levels. This is the puzzle. This is why it's like a Christopher Nolan movie. There's the obvious one and there's the real one. Dr. Pierre Grimes would say, people always have 2 questions. The questions they ask and their real question. So this is the question he's asking. Nothing may escape us. In terms of your argument. So on that level, he's bringing in the key terms, he's simplifying it, he's making it clear, he's using his art of the logos to clarify his position. He's also phrasing it as a question. Am I off the mark? Are we together? This is not a straw man argument where debate bros, philonikoses, like to present a crappy version of your argument so they can knock it down. That's called a straw man. Or not clarify it. The American presidential debate last week, or whenever it was, nobody clarified their position at all. There was all freaking nonsense. He's clarifying their position and asking it as a question. Part of the logos, asking it as a question. Secondly, can you see any other levels? Well, in terms of what he told us was most important or significant, we have to make sure that doesn't escape us, right? What's that? The art of the logos. So if he is doing this purposefully, maybe he's doing it to show us something about how the art of the logos works. Maybe. Keep that open as a question. CB says, I do not at present wish to take anything away or to add anything. You have expressed my meaning. Real quick. Let's see if there's any key differences in the actual Greek, because it seemed pretty straightforward. Do not boast, lest some jealousy be set in motion to overturn our destined logos. Okay, already. Okay, let's read this whole part. We truly gained favor with the followers of Cadmus. You've dealt with the logos about harmony in a wonderful way, almost as if beyond belief. Well, that's an interesting expression. We happen to be using that expression all the way through, beyond belief. It was just like a coincidence, not a coincidence, but something interesting. We were using that, right? We were saying the significance of the nous and being is beyond belief. It's unopinable. And here's the actual expression, beyond belief. Curious. And the word is paradoxon. Philodoxia. Actually, let's nail it down. Paradoxon. Beyond doxia. And so doxia, philodoxia is of course lovers of opinion, opposite of philosophia, lovers of wisdom. So, beyond belief. For when Simmias was speaking of his puzzles, I was very much wondering if anyone would be able to provide whatever was required for the logos of self. Oh my God, we missed that. Can you see how important this text is? The logos of self. The self logos, that's a big one. This is our whole thing. We want to see the logos of self. We want to follow the logos of self. We want to get to the self with the logos of self in our back pocket. This is our destiny. Wow, imagine missing that. We're so lucky to have this translation. And then it suddenly appeared to me in a marvelous way that the logos of harmonia could not sustain the first approach of your logos. And so, surely then I would not be amazed if the logos of Cadmus suffered the same fate. O good friend, do not boast, lest some jealousy be set in motion to overturn our destined logos. Okay? We talked about the first time. Actually, let's see if this is the first time. Okay, I think... No, he has mentioned destiny before. Self came together by a certain destiny. Socrates, page 1. Page 45. No. Destined logos is where we are. And... okay, this is the second time that we've got the word destiny. So, we talked about the opening paragraph in the text. Well, in the opening paragraph of the text, the very first section, Socrates asked, why was Socrates put to death after he was sentenced? Self came together by a certain destiny. So, two levels. The real question underneath the obvious one. What is it that we want to bring together, self? How is it going to come together for us? A certain destiny. Interesting. And we talked about a certain coincidence that that we were using the expression beyond belief, but maybe it's not. Maybe the better word is destiny. And what are we trying to bring together? The self. How do we bring it together? The art of the logos. So here's our art of the logos. So here we see a playing out of the promise in the opening section. The opening section having in a microcosm what's going to play out in the macrocosm. As above, so below. Interesting. So, apart from the opening, this is the first time we've had the word destiny. Interesting, right? Our hypothesis is philosophy will help us reach the universal destiny of man. That's the ladder up. And fate, its shadow. So, oh, and by the way, suffered the same fate. Here's the other word. So here are our two, destiny and fate. Our hypothesis that we were just talking about. Pretty cool. Or maybe pretty destined. Interesting how this game plays. So, don't boast. Otherwise, some jealousy might be set in motion. And by the way, you might find a demonstration of this in your life. When you start to feel like, oh, that argument was really good. I'm pretty smart. As though it was you, whatever your image of you is, and not the divine logos. Then sometimes you can end up tripping up over your own shoelaces. by being boastful. Now, of course, boasting and jealousy are key terms in Greek mythology. So, dramatically, it might represent it as what we often like to call hubris, but boasting, and then the gods become jealous. Like literally, we talked about today the Garden of Eden. God was, in the text, was very jealous of Adam and Eve. And the snake said so, telling the truth. But we were lied about it by the people who taught us the mythology. Is that ethical or not? So, in mythology, often the gods can be jealous and the men can be boastful and so on. But here, we recognize that it's a mythology. It's a story, a narrative device to talk about what is true. So it's not actual boasting, it's going against what Socrates has been doing. Socrates has been calling in the logos, watching the logos, allowing in the logos from self to unfold, trusting the logos. So here, Cebes is like giving Socrates the credit, saying, hey, don't be boastful, otherwise the gods will get jealous. But what we can hypothesize the actual meaning, not the mythological meaning, the actual boasting and jealousy, but don't misunderstand where the logos is coming from, because that might get in your way. Overturn the destined logos. However, on one hand, surely we can leave these matters to the care of the God, to the care for the God. Yeah. Let the gods care for the logos. Let's just do our best to maintain our own virtue and match them as best we can. But on the other hand, let us proceed in Homeric fashion. Let us pierce right through the logos at hand and see if there is anything that accords with what you say. Okay, some notes about Cadmus from our translator. But surely then, the main point of what you seek is this. It is worth demonstrating that our soul is indeed immortal and indestructible, so that if a philosophic person, our philosophia, who is about to die is supremely confident in the face of death that they will also lead a better life in Hades than if they had died while living differently in a vicious or vice way, the significance of the virtues. He's supremely confident because he followed his virtues in his life. He's going to a better life in the next. Is not being unintelligently confident and foolish in his confidence. Thus, it is worthwhile to reveal to the light of day. Interesting, bringing to light, that's an interesting metaphor. Why it is that the soul is mighty and a divine idea. So, again, so different from the other texts. So good that we can read both. The soul is not just, what does the other text say? The other text said, his confidence is senseless and foolish, and altogether we show that the soul is strong and godlike, and existed before we were born as men. Strong and godlike. Now let's see the actual Greek. Strong and godlike becomes mighty. Yeah, same difference. And a divine idea. Now, the word is Deo, divine, God. So it's got the God part right. Let's get the Greek translation. Deo or Theo Eides. Idea. So, this is the one that has been famously betrayed. One of the great betrayals of philosophy is translating idea as forms. You go to study philosophy at school, one way of dismissing true philosophy is to, it's forms, like there's a form, there's a divine chair in heaven, so it's the form of the chair. No. Idea says idea here. It's a Greek word that means to behold. And we're seeing now why that's the case. So we're learning the art of the logos, particularly towards the ideas, because we've seen that all of the selfer terms, that which we stamp the seal, that which absolutely is, are part of the hyparxis called self-ousia. They are aspects of it, ways of beholding it. Therefore, ideas. So the soul itself is an idea. It has its essence as an aspect of self-ousia. It's not just that which knew self-ousia, and therefore we can learn through remembering, but it is eternal and immortal because it's part of the divine eidos. Our soul is of the nature of the divine eidos. So no wonder it's immortal. Like, this seems to be the criteria for it being immortal, because self-ousia, the divine eidos, what we call being, or you could say the divine realm or God, God's a bit problematic because there might be a way of, because the word is used differently in a lot of different ways. You might say, well, this is the divine, but the real God is the self, which is beyond the divine. So let's just stick with the word divine. For the soul to be divine, it has to be an eidos. And that she was even way before we came to be human beings. Yet, all this does not keep her from being immortal, but only reveals that the soul is long-lasting. Okay, this is why we need the other text, because that wasn't worded very well. Does not keep her from being immortal. So it doesn't mean that she's necessarily immortal, but only reveals that the soul is long-lasting and that the soul existed for some time before. Even if the soul is mighty and a divine eidos, doesn't mean it's immortal. Interesting. So it existed for an extraordinary amount of time, and that she knew and did many things. So it had the knowledge, did many things, but for all that, she was no more immortal. But her very entrance into the human body was the beginning of her destruction, just as if she were a disease. Our human life is a disease. She would live that life in distress, oh no, and would in the end be destroyed, indeed, in what we call death. Thus you say that it surely makes no difference whether she enters a body once or many times in regards to the fear in each of us. For you say it is proper to be afraid, if one is not unintelligent, neither knowing nor being able to give proof. And the word proof, we can read Logon. What's that? Oops. Damn it. What's that? Logos. So, we have our knowing, and we have our proof, which is from the word logos. So there we have our two rungs of our ladder. Right? Pretty cool. Pretty cool. So, you have to know, you have to verify your logos in experience, but you also have to use the art of the logos to prove it. That the soul is immortal. This is the standard. This is what. So not only is he clarifying CB's position, he's setting himself a really high standard. This is what we're going to have to do. If you really want to vanquish your fear, you have to be able to give proof, which is the logos. That certain logos which is true and firm and understandable. That has been rejected by all those who aren't philosophers, who want to be lovers of opinion. Cosplay as wise people, professional opinion havers. The thing they reject, we need to use it. But also we have to verify our logos, our understanding in knowledge. We have to get to the banquet ourselves. Join the party. You don't send your slave to a banquet. You want to get to the realm of being yourself. It's not a probability like science, which is just in the physical world. It's actually knowing. Okay, so he's high bar for himself. Such things, I think, is what you maintain, O CBs. And I deliberately repeat it often in order that the point may not escape us. Which is great because we often repeat ourselves on this channel. We go over the same thing. Sometimes we'll get a new person in chat, we might have to recap. But we're going over it again often. This is as Socrates says, if you were to spend money on anything, it's to find someone who can sing this song every night, every day. Just as in the text, they would often meet at the gates of the prison where Socrates was being held to discuss the self, as they waited for, waited to be led into the prison. So too, we have, Socrates says, philosophers have to keep repeating the doctrine to each other, and keep practicing the dialectic until the divine self lets us into this realm of being. As above, so below. Same relations, different terms. Macrocosm, multicosm. Patterns all the way up. Isn't that wonderful? So if there's an art of the logos, you have to involve recognizing these kinds of patterns and applying it to whatever level you're on, to whatever person you're talking with. So we can add that into our hypothesis of the art of the logos. If there is these patterns, just like a doctor, there are patterns to the healthy body, there are patterns to illnesses. You can't just see one healthy body, you have to be able to see it in everyone relative to where they're at. Anyone who comes into your office, it can't just be people you've already seen before. So, knowing and prove the soul is immortal. I deliberately repeat it often, as we do, in order that the point may not escape us. You may add or subtract anything if you wish. There is nothing that I at least want to subtract or add at the present moment, for this is what I said and meant. Okay, we have the groundwork. We've asked a lot of questions today about this, the art of the logos. We talked about the as above, so below. We saw the conclusion of harmonia. We reflected on the way in which masters like this will introduce that which is important while also addressing the particular, the two levels of question. The particular question and the real question, just like in a good book, there is the particular story, but there's the real story you have to discover. Beyond belief, we've seen symmetry from the gods, leading us to destiny, reflecting the words that we happen to be using. Beyond belief, fate and destiny. The logos of self we've seen as a key thing, reflecting the beginning. The self came together in a destined way. So we've seen a lot, and we've got the table set for the next argument. Can he vanquish? Who's he calling it? What's his name? Cadmus. Can he vanquish Cadmus the same way he vanquished Harmonia? And he's setting a higher standard for this one, to be able to know and give proof that the soul is immortal. Not just that we happen to exist for a long time, literally immortal. So those are the stakes for himself and for us, because we want to vanquish this fear of death ourselves, but we also want to learn the way in which we can do it, so that whoever comes into our office we can heal and perfect. Whatever argument we are faced with in our life, we can apply the art of the logos to address fairly. To whatever person we want to use our art of the logos to benefit. As through physical training or medical treatments. Through the dialectic, this section here, a lot of clues there. So we want to be able to do that wherever we find it. So big stakes. Can we vanquish Cadmus as we vanquish Harmonia? And can we learn the art as we go, which we have to discover, making us more like Socrates? And if the logos is from the divine and from self, making us more like self. So we are coming together to the self through the logos of self, being most like self, which is our way to enter the realm of being through the divine self, and maybe even beyond, to our destiny, knowing the one self. So on that cliffhanger and on that bombshell, I hope to see you next time. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to like, subscribe. Feel free to join us on Twitch. If you want notifications on when we stream, join the Discord. I give an announcement before we go live, so you can get a message on Discord there, and you can jump onto the Twitch stream and join our friends watching in real time. You can find them on find the videos on YouTube as well, and hopefully there'll be a Patreon up now, if not soon. And if you want to support the channel, feel free to join the Patreon, and there should be benefits and perks for those who do that. Thank you so much. Hope you're wondering. Hope you're inspired to discover the art of the logos and to match Socrates as the ideal hero. And I hope you're as excited about what philosophy does as I am, that it makes things simple. It points out that there is a knowable realm of being, there is an understandable logos, there is an art of the logos, and all of these things you can techne, skill, all of these things you can unify as art of the logos. So simple. All the problems, the implications if the art of the logos isn't. All that which is great, good, providential in this life and the next, the art of the logos. It's so simple. But it's the simplicity you can only see if you play the game. That's why...
You're a wizard, Harry.
It's for everyone.
I'm looking for someone to share in an adventure.
So now hopefully when we have all parts, so now we've got a desire for that art of the logos, maybe we can do activities that'll bring the art of the logos to us, and we can use the art of the logos in our planning, reasoning, and functioning. Maybe we can become harmonious within ourselves. Maybe we could call that virtues. And maybe if we keep doing this, harmonizing ourselves towards this ideal hero, towards the art of the logos, we can be, as Socrates is saying, what does he say? I should have highlighted it. So we will be supremely confident in the face of our own death. By unifying our souls to the art of the logos, which we could call virtue. Supremely confident in the face of our death that we will also lead a better life in that next world than if we had died while having lived differently in a non-harmonized towards the art of the logos way, or vice way. I hope that's exciting for you. Hope that's inspiring. On that note, I'm going to thank you again and hope to see you next time. Take care.